My name is Claire Thompson, and at 38, I've built a $1 billion empire from nothing. But nothing prepares you for the moment the people who threw you away show up at your mansion's gate, smiling like they never erased you. 15 years. Not a call, not a birthday, not even a whisper. Now they want back in? They say it's about family. But what they don't know is, I've been waiting for this moment, not to forgive, but to finally show them exactly what being discarded created. Sit down, because what I did next, they never saw coming. Growing up in the Thompson household felt like living inside a glass box, seen but never touched. From the outside, we were the picture of suburban success, pristine lawns, smiling holiday photos, and the kind of house where nothing ever looked out of place. But behind the perfect facade was a reality I learned not to speak of. I was the daughter who didn't belong. Not really. My earliest memories aren't of bedtime stories or warm embraces. They're of cold glances, polite nods, and that familiar phrase my mother would mutter any time I asked for something more than the bare minimum. "You should be grateful we took you in." I heard it when I asked for new shoes because mine had holes. I heard it when I cried after being bullied at school and wanted someone, anyone, to care. Gratitude was supposed to replace love. Obedience was supposed to earn affection. But no matter how hard I tried, I remained invisible. Ethan and Vanessa, my older adoptive siblings, were the golden children. Ethan was the athlete with a wall full of trophies and a fan club of adoring relatives. Vanessa, the beauty queen with straight A's and piano recitals that ended in standing ovations. I remember standing in the hallway once, clutching a science fair certificate with a gold seal, waiting to show it off. But before I could speak, my mother brushed past me with a proud smile, headed straight for Vanessa's room. She'd just won first place at her school's talent show. My certificate stayed folded in my desk drawer. No one ever saw it. Dinner time was the worst. The conversations swirled around me. Tales of Ethan's game-winning touchdown or Vanessa's speech team triumphs. I was a ghost at the table, my voice irrelevant, my presence a footnote. Once, I corrected a fact during dinner, just a small detail about a historical date. My father, Gregory, didn't look up from his plate. "No one likes a know-it-all, Claire," he said flatly. Vanessa giggled. Ethan smirked. I went silent. The only light in those years was Grandma Grace, my mother's mother, who visited once a month like clockwork. Unlike the rest of them, she saw me, not as a charity case or a shadow, but as someone worth listening to. She'd bring me books, not because she wanted to keep me quiet, but because she knew I devoured stories like oxygen. We'd bake together in the kitchen while she whispered things no one else dared say. "You have a spark, Claire. One day it'll light up the world. Don't let them dim it." She was the first person who hugged me because she wanted to, not out of obligation. With her, I laughed freely, asked questions without being shut down, and believed, just for a moment, that maybe I was lovable. When she left, the silence returned, louder than ever. Once, I asked Margaret why Grandma Grace didn't visit more often. She replied, "She spoils you. And spoiled children grow up thinking they deserve the world. You need discipline, not fairy tales." At school, I tried to overachieve my way into visibility. Straight A's, perfect attendance, reading more than anyone else in my grade. I joined clubs, entered contests, volunteered for everything. But at home, none of it mattered. "You're not athletic like Ethan," my father would say. "Not as charming as Vanessa," my mother echoed. "Be more like them. You'll never get far just being smart." So I shrank. I learned to take up less space. I stopped showing them my report cards. I stopped expecting praise. Instead, I stored away every slight, every ignored birthday, every backhanded compliment in a quiet vault inside me. Years later, people would call me resilient. But resilience isn't born from strength. It's born from surviving people who make you feel like you don't deserve to exist. And in that house, that was exactly how I felt. Like a placeholder in a photo album, someone who filled a legal checkbox but never a place in anyone's heart. I was 12 the first time I heard the phrase that would haunt me into adulthood. It was late, past midnight, and I had snuck downstairs for a glass of water. The hallway light was off, but the kitchen door was cracked just enough to let voices spill out. I paused. My parents rarely stayed up this late unless something was wrong. Margaret's voice was low but sharp. "You promised me we wouldn't treat her any differently." Gregory scoffed. She's not even ours, Margaret. What do you expect me to do? Pretend she is? My breath hitched. My fingers clenched the banister. She's just a child, Margaret said, softer now, but with an edge of bitterness. She didn't ask to be born. Gregory replied, Neither did I ask to raise someone else's mistake. That one sentence shattered the last illusion I had. Someone else's mistake. I didn't make a sound, didn't cry, didn't move until the voices stopped and the lights turned off. Then I crept back upstairs, heart pounding in a rhythm too fast to be calm. I stared at the ceiling for hours, the same words looping in my mind. She's not even ours. The next day, nothing changed. Margaret still reminded me to fold my laundry. Gregory still avoided eye contact. Ethan and Vanessa still acted like I was the family pet that overstayed its welcome. But something inside me had shifted permanently. I began noticing things I hadn't before. How my baby pictures were absent from the hallway wall filled with family milestones. How my name was often omitted when Margaret sent out family holiday cards. How, during introductions at church or social events, my parents would say, These are our children, Ethan and Vanessa, and pause awkwardly before adding, and Claire. When I asked Margaret about it once, she said I was being sensitive. You're imagining things, she insisted, but I wasn't. The erasure was subtle, but it was real. And then came my 14th birthday, the day I could no longer pretend. We had a small celebration at home. Nothing grand. Vanessa got a pool party with her entire class the year before. Ethan had a backyard BBQ with a rented game truck. For me? Store-bought cupcakes, a card signed Love the Thompsons, and a hastily wrapped book. Still, I was grateful for the attention, rare as it was. Gregory even took a few pictures on his old camera, capturing us near the dining table. Weeks later, while looking for a school project in his study, I stumbled upon the photo album he kept meticulously updated. Curious, I flipped through the latest pages, half hoping to see my birthday photo. My stomach dropped. There it was. The photo I remembered. Same pose, same background. But something was off. I looked closer and realized it had been cropped. My face was missing. Ethan, Vanessa, Margaret, and Gregory stood smiling, cupcakes on the table, candles glowing. I was gone, edited out like a mistake. I stared at the image for what felt like forever, willing it to change, hoping it was a printing error, a fluke. But when I checked the digital folder on the desktop, the original was still there. The cropped version was saved separately, titled Family Birthday Updated. Updated. Something inside me cracked that day. I didn't cry. I didn't confront anyone. I simply closed the file, slipped out of the room, and began what would become my secret project, documenting every instance, every detail, every subtle effort they made to erase me from their lives. I started keeping a journal, coded, just in case someone found it. I saved screenshots, forwarded myself photos, emails, posts that left my name out. I backed them up to a hidden flash drive and labeled it with a sticker. For when they deny it. It wasn't revenge I wanted, it was proof. I needed something tangible to hold when the gaslighting got too loud. When they told me I was imagining things. When they said I should be grateful. That year, I stopped trying to be seen and started preparing for the day they'd pretend I never existed. Getting into Stanford should have been one of the proudest moments of my life. I remember clutching the acceptance letter, fingers trembling, scanning the bolded sentence over and over again. Congratulations, you've been admitted to Stanford University's School of Engineering. I had worked for it. Long nights in the library, part-time jobs on weekends, countless scholarship essays written in secret. I hadn't dared to hope too much, not because I doubted myself, but because I knew the celebration would be mine alone. Still, I wanted to tell someone. I came downstairs, letter in hand, trying to hide the grin stretching across my face. Margaret was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables. Gregory sat at the breakfast bar, reading the paper. Ethan was already out for football practice. Vanessa sprawled on the couch, watching TV. I got in, I said, holding the letter up. Stanford, full scholarship. Margaret didn't look up. That's far, she said. Very expensive to live there, even with scholarships. Gregory folded his paper with a sigh. You'll need to figure out housing. We can't afford to support you out west. No, congratulations. No smile. Not even eye contact. Vanessa barely turned her head. Good for you, I guess. I backed out of the room with a nod, retreating to my bedroom, the letter now a weight instead of a victory. I should have expected it. Still, a part of me had hoped, for once, they'd surprise me. Claire, the ghost, even in triumph. I left that August with 2 suitcases, $600 in savings, and a farewell that felt more like a polite dismissal than a goodbye. No one came to drop me off. No one called after the first week, except Grandma Grace. She sent letters every month, handwritten in blue ink, always ending with, "I'm so proud of you, Claire. Keep shining." She never forgot a birthday, never missed a milestone. When I aced my first final, she sent a small cake through the mail, smudged but perfect. When I landed my first paid internship, she mailed me a vintage brooch and a card that read, "You were made for more." She was my anchor, my proof that I wasn't invisible to everyone. And then, halfway through my sophomore year, came the call. Grandma Grace had passed away. Heart failure in her sleep. I stood in the middle of my dorm hallway, numb, barely hearing the voice on the line. Margaret had called, her tone clipped and formal. "She's gone. The funeral's Thursday. You probably can't make it with school and all, but I thought you should know." I booked the earliest flight I could. My professors understood. My roommates pooled money for a ride share to the airport, but by the time I arrived in Chicago, the funeral was over. They'd buried her without me. Margaret's excuse? "We didn't think you'd make it in time," Gregory added. "Besides, it was a small service, family only." I was too tired to argue. I didn't cry. Not then. My grief was compact, swallowed, stored away. I sat silently in the living room, watching people I barely knew murmur condolences. No one asked how I was doing. No one acknowledged how close Grandma Grace and I had been. That afternoon, the family gathered for the reading of her will. The lawyer, a mild-looking man in his 50s, cleared his throat. "To my daughter Margaret, I leave the house and its contents. To Ethan, my vehicle. To Vanessa, my jewelry." He paused, glancing at me. "To my granddaughter Claire, I leave my ruby ring and the sum of $5,000. Claire, you were always a light in my life. Never let them make you feel small." The silence in the room thickened. Margaret's mouth curled. "5,000 and a trinket? That's it?" Gregory muttered something under his breath, and Vanessa rolled her eyes. But I didn't care. That ring wasn't just jewelry. It had been Grandma Grace's since I was little. I used to play with it while we baked cookies. She once told me it belonged to her grandmother, passed down to women who knew how to survive. I slipped it onto my finger, and for the first time since the phone call, I let the tears fall. Not for what I'd lost, but for the one person who had truly seen me. As I turned the ruby ring around my finger, still absorbing the weight of Grandma Grace's final gift, Ethan let out a snort. "Well, I guess even the old woman played favorites. I mean, it's not like she was really your grandmother anyway." The room froze. A stillness fell over everyone, broken only by the ticking of the wall clock above the mantel. My fingers stopped moving. My breath caught. Slowly, I looked up at him. "What did you just say?" Ethan shrugged far too casually. "It's not a secret, Claire. Everyone knows. You're not really family." I stared at him, searching his expression for the smirk that would tell me it was a cruel joke. But he wasn't smirking. His tone wasn't even angry. It was dismissive. Matter of fact, as if stating I didn't belong was as common as commenting on the weather. Gregory's jaw tensed. Margaret shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "I think that's enough, Ethan," she said sharply. "No," I said, louder than I intended. "Let him talk. Or better yet, you talk, Margaret. What does he mean I'm not family?" Margaret looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Her hands smoothed over her skirt, over and over again, like she could iron out the tension in the room. "It wasn't something we planned to tell you this way?" My voice was shaking now. "Tell me what, exactly?" She sighed. "You're not adopted, Claire." "Not exactly." "What does that mean?" Gregory finally spoke, low and gruff. "You were born from a situation, a complication." My heart thudded against my ribcage. Margaret continued, her tone clipped. "You're Gregory's biological daughter, from a relationship he had before we were married. The woman, your birth mother, was someone he dated briefly in college. She passed away when you were just a toddler. No family stepped up to take you. We took you in." "You took me in?" My voice cracked. It was the right thing to do, Gregory said, as if he deserved applause for it. So I'm the product of an affair, I whispered, a secret. And you raised me because… What? You didn't want the scandal? Margaret nodded stiffly. There were rumors. Your mother's death was sudden, and you were left alone. We didn't want Gregory's reputation affected. It was easier to say we adopted you. Easier? I laughed, bitter and hollow. You mean easier to hide me, to bury me in this house and pretend I didn't exist unless someone asked? Gregory didn't deny it. You raised me like a charity case, I said, voice rising. Treated me like I should be grateful for every crumb of attention. Meanwhile, you were hiding the fact that I'm his daughter? You were provided for, Margaret said defensively. We gave you food, clothes, education, affection, I cut in. Love, any sliver of acknowledgement that I belonged here? No one answered. I stood slowly, feeling like my legs might give out. So that's it. I was never really part of this family. Just a walking reminder of your mistake. You're overreacting, Gregory muttered. I looked around the room at people I had once desperately tried to earn love from. There was no warmth in their eyes, no regret, only discomfort, embarrassment that their dirty little secret had been spoken aloud. I turned to the lawyer. Can I take the ring and the check now? He nodded silently, sliding the envelope across the table. I took it and walked to the door without saying goodbye. As I stepped into the cold Chicago air, the ruby ring on my finger seemed to burn, not with heat, but with truth. Back in my hotel room, I opened my journal. For the first time, I didn't write about what had been done to me. I wrote what I would do next. They didn't want me, but the world will. From this moment forward, I rise. San Francisco smelled like ambition. Coffee, rain, and asphalt warmed by the dreams of people who had everything to prove. I arrived with a duffel bag, a laptop from college, Grandma Grace's ruby ring, and just under $5,000 in my account. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and for the first time, no one could take it away from me. I found a listing on a campus board for a shared apartment in the Outer Mission District. It was small, damp, and came with 2 roommates I barely saw. One was a nurse on night shifts, the other a PhD student buried in books. We shared a single bathroom, a creaky stove, and a refrigerator that moaned like it was dying. Still, it was better than the Thompson house. The first job I landed was in tech support at a second-tier software company. The pay was minimum wage, the hours long, and the customers rude. But I kept my head down and worked. I memorized every keyboard shortcut, wrote manuals in my free time, and solved problems no one else wanted to touch. Every night after my shift ended, I'd walk the few blocks back to the apartment, heat up leftover noodles, and crack open my laptop. I devoured free online courses, data structures, encryption, back-end systems. I stayed up until dawn teaching myself code, sometimes sleeping only a few hours before dragging myself back to the office. The bags under my eyes became permanent. My social life evaporated, but every line of code I mastered felt like a brick in the foundation of something real. No one was cheering for me, no one was watching, and maybe that was the point. It was during one of those long nights, scrolling through local tech events, that I stumbled upon a flyer for a free cybersecurity workshop hosted at the city library. The speaker? Dr. Lillian West, an expert in digital privacy from Berkeley. I hesitated. Imposter syndrome was my constant companion, but something about the way the flyer described her work, a mix of theory and real-world application, pulled me in. That Saturday, I showed up early and took a seat in the back row. The room filled quickly with students, hobbyists, and startup hopefuls. Dr. West walked in 5 minutes late, laptop in hand, her gray curls wild and her presence calm. She didn't introduce herself with a resume. She opened with a question. What if your password wasn't a word, but a behavior? I leaned forward. For the next 90 minutes, she spoke about pattern recognition, behavioral authentication, and how human habits could become digital fingerprints. Her ideas were years ahead of what I'd seen online. When the session ended, people gathered around her with praise and handshakes. I waited until most had left, heart racing, clutching the notebook where I'd scribbled half the lecture. I approached her with a question, something about keystroke dynamics and false positives in behavioral systems. She paused, studied me for a moment, and then smiled. That's an insightful angle, she said. Most people don't catch that nuance. I told her about my background, briefly, that I was self-taught, working in support, learning everything I could on the side. I left out the rest, the pain, the exile, the reasons I had nowhere else to go. She listened without checking her watch. When I stopped, she asked, "Are you planning to attend the cybersecurity hackathon at Berkeley next month?" I shook my head. Didn't know it was open to outsiders. It is. You should come. I nodded, unsure whether it was an invitation or a brush-off. But when I turned to leave, she added, "You have a good mind for this. Keep going." It was the first time in years someone had said they believed in me, and meant it. That night, I registered for the hackathon. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. The Berkeley Hackathon was held in an old lecture hall that smelled like energy drinks and ambition. I arrived early, clutching my secondhand laptop and a backpack filled with snacks, backup batteries, and far more doubt than confidence. I didn't know anyone on my team. 3 strangers, a front-end whiz named Marcus, a systems engineer named Reza, and a UX designer who barely spoke but sketched like a machine. Our task? Identify a real-world security flaw and pitch a prototype within 48 hours. I pitched my idea hesitantly, a behavioral authentication model that learned user habits, keystroke speed, scroll rhythm, mouse gestures, and created dynamic digital fingerprints. No passwords, just you. To my surprise, the team liked it. Reza jumped in with infrastructure designs. Marcus started coding. I handled the back-end logic, shaping the adaptive algorithms that would evolve with each user interaction. We worked in shifts, fueled by caffeine and adrenaline. When the final round came, we presented to a panel of cybersecurity experts. I did the talking. My hands shook, but my voice held steady. I explained the limitations of traditional passwords, how behavioral patterns were harder to replicate, how our system reduced false logins by 83% in just 24 hours. When the judges announced third place, I barely registered our team's name. I was too stunned. We'd placed. We'd built something that mattered. That evening, as the crowd dispersed, Dr. West found me near the vending machines. "Told you," she said with a knowing smile. "You think differently. That's your superpower." She introduced me to a few colleagues. One of them, a sharp-eyed investor named Caleb Morgan, lingered longer than the others. We exchanged contacts, though I assumed nothing would come of it. Emboldened by the hackathon, I polished my prototype, built a basic website, and started pitching. I researched angels and VCs, attended meetups, emailed cold. 27 investors heard me out. 27 said no. Some called it too early stage. Others wanted a full team or a proven founder. One even said, "You're impressive, but we usually invest in men with experience." Each rejection hit like a brick, but none hit hard enough to stop me. Then came email number 28 from Caleb Morgan. "Let's talk," it said. We met at a quiet cafe near Embarcadero. Caleb was casual, jeans, blazer, leather notebook. He let me explain everything again, this time with more polish, more urgency, more clarity. When I finished, he nodded thoughtfully. "I don't usually invest in solo founders, especially untested ones. But your idea has legs. You remind me of someone." I tilted my head. "Who?" He smiled faintly. "A woman I met a long time ago, ran a bookstore in Chicago. Fierce, brilliant, never let the world tell her no." My breath caught. "Grace, Grandma Grace?" His smile widened. "She once told me her granddaughter would change everything." My throat tightened. "She was right," Caleb said. "Let's get you started." He offered $200,000, seed money to build a working prototype. It wasn't a fortune, but it was oxygen. I used every cent wisely. I moved into a tiny co-working space, bought updated equipment, stopped taking overtime at tech support. My roommates noticed the change in my energy but didn't ask questions. I preferred it that way. Each night, I coded until my wrists ached. I failed, rebuilt, tested, and refined. I didn't sleep much. I didn't party. I didn't complain. I was building something that no one could take away from me. And every time I doubted myself, I twisted the ruby ring on my finger and remembered Grace's words. "You were made for more." She was gone, but she had left me just enough to begin. I named the company Secure Now, not just for what it promised users, but for what it meant to me. Security, finally. Now. Not someday. Not if someone else approved. Now. The day I registered the business, I signed the paperwork with a borrowed pen and trembling hands. The ink bled a little. My fingers were cold. But the moment was real. I rented a small office above a bookstore, a single room with peeling paint, flickering lights, and enough space for 3 desks. At first, it was just me and a folding chair. But within weeks, I found the first people who would help build my empire. There was Layla, a systems engineer who had been laid off twice because she didn't fit the culture. She wore combat boots to interviews and never smiled unless she meant it. She read my prototype documentation and said, This is going to scare the hell out of big tech. I'm in." Then Ty, a non-binary coder who dropped out of a prestigious school after facing relentless discrimination. They could break down encryption like it was origami. They joined without asking about salary, just the mission. And Maya, a former military analyst who'd spent 2 years homeless after her discharge. She walked into our space wearing a thrift store blazer and eyes that had seen too much. I offered her a role as head of security infrastructure. She cried in the stairwell before accepting. We weren't the kind of team that made headlines. No Ivy League pedigrees, no buzzword-slinging sales guys. But we had grit and purpose, and something none of our competitors had. Nothing left to lose. We worked like possessed people. Days bled into nights, nights into dawns. We lived off ramen and vending machine coffee. I slept on the couch in the office more times than I can count. Layla kept a sleeping bag under her desk. Ty coded with noise-canceling headphones, and Maya installed every system twice for redundancy. I didn't lead with pep talks or team-building exercises. I led by working harder than everyone else, and by making sure no one felt invisible. Every birthday was celebrated. Every success was acknowledged. When Layla's dog passed away, we closed early. When Ty needed time off for surgery, we covered everything. No questions. No guilt. This was more than a startup. It was a rebellion. Our prototype, Keyless ID, was unlike anything on the market. It used behavioral biometrics to create real-time identity profiles, your typing speed, your scroll patterns, how you moved your mouse, how you behaved when no one was watching. Passwords became irrelevant. Hacking became nearly impossible. I remember the day our inbox pinged with an email from VantageScore, a mid-sized finance company looking for a solution to a recent data breach. They had stumbled on our white paper and they were intrigued. We scrambled to prep a demo. Maya locked down our systems. Ty ran test environments. Layla and I worked on the pitch deck until our eyes burned. The morning of the call, I wore a black blazer I'd found at a thrift store and a simple necklace Grandma Grace once gave me. I sat at our wobbly IKEA desk, laptop balanced on a stack of books. We pitched. They asked questions, tough ones. We answered every single one. 3 days later, they signed a 6-month pilot contract, the first deal. We popped sparkling water in the office and ordered pizza with real toppings. Ty played music too loud. Layla danced like no one was watching. Maya teared up and said, "This is what winning feels like." I stood by the window that night, staring out at the city lights. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were becoming something the world had to notice. The contract with VantageScore opened floodgates we weren't prepared for. Within months, we signed 2 more clients, one in e-commerce, the other in healthcare. The office was too small. The coffee machine broke. Our code base tripled. But we were alive. 3 years after I wrote my first line of back-end code, Secure Now was valued at $80 million. I celebrated not with champagne, but by purchasing a house. Not just any house. A 7-bedroom estate in Atherton tucked into one of Silicon Valley's most exclusive neighborhoods. 3 acres of land, a guest house, floor-to-ceiling windows that caught the morning sun just right. It wasn't just about the square footage. This was a promise to myself. Each room was intentional. One wing became a library. Real shelves, hand-built, lined with every book I had once borrowed from Grandma Grace or dreamt of owning when I was a kid stuck in the shadows. I filled it with leather chairs and soft lighting and warm, honeyed wood. In the garden, I worked with a landscape architect to create winding paths lined with Grandma's favorite flowers, lavender, roses, gardenias. In one quiet corner, I placed a bench with a small plaque, "In memory of Grace," the only one who saw me. It was the first space that ever felt truly mine. And yet, some nights, sitting in the quiet of that massive house, success echoing off marble floors, I still felt hollow. There was no one to share it with. Not really. One morning, a notification pinged on my phone, a flagged email forwarded from my lawyer. The subject line stopped me cold. Margaret Thompson. Inquiry regarding Claire Thompson. Media request. I opened it. It was from a mid-tier journalist at a clickbait outlet thanking Margaret for willingness to provide insight into Claire's upbringing for our upcoming profile. My blood chilled. Attached were scanned excerpts of Margaret's handwritten notes, mentions of behavioral issues, delusions of grandeur, and mental instability following the death of a family member. There was even a photo, me at 13, unsmiling, shoulders hunched. But what struck me wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the name CC'd at the bottom of the exchange, Caleb Morgan. I called him immediately. He answered after 2 rings. Claire. Did she reach out to you? Silence. Then, yes. When? Last week. She said she was writing a memoir, wanted validation, said it was a family story that included you. I exhaled slowly. Did you respond? I told her to lose my number. The fury didn't come immediately. It seeped in slowly like ink in water. She hadn't just tried to exploit me. She'd used the only connection I had left to Grace, Caleb, the man who believed in me when no one else did. And now she'd tried to poison that too. I didn't reply to the journalist. My lawyer sent a cease and desist, but I wrote Margaret one final message. This is the last time you'll ever touch anything connected to me. I built this life without you, and I'll guard it without apology. I never hit send. I deleted it, because she didn't deserve even that much. That night, I sat in the library, curled up on the window seat, surrounded by thousands of books and silence. I had money, influence, autonomy, but success didn't fill every hollow, and no house, no matter how grand, could quiet the ache of being unwanted. Still, I reminded myself, I was no longer the girl begging for space at someone else's table. Now, I owned the house, and I was building my own table. Sunday mornings had become sacred, the one time in the week where no meetings, no pitches, no fires demanded my attention. Just coffee, silence, and the soft hum of garden fountains outside my Atherton estate. That morning, I wore a silk robe, curled up on the terrace with a steaming mug and a book I'd read too many times. The hummingbirds were out, the sun filtered through the lavender leaves. It was the kind of stillness I used to beg the universe for. Then, the security chime interrupted everything. Motion detected at main gate. I frowned, reached for the tablet beside me, and opened the camera feed. The image loaded slowly, as if teasing me. When it did, the mug nearly slipped from my hand. Standing at the gate, nervous, awkward, out of place, were ghosts I never expected to see again. Gregory, Margaret, Ethan, Vanessa, and 2 children, 1 boy, 1 girl, clinging to Vanessa's hands. I blinked, stared harder, convinced myself it was a glitch, a cruel trick of light. But no, it was them. 15 years of silence, no calls, no apologies, no acknowledgments. And now they were here, at my home. My fingers hovered over the intercom button, then stopped. Every nerve in my body screamed to shut the system off, to walk away, to pretend I never saw it. I owed them nothing. Instead, I zoomed in on their faces. Gregory's hair had gone completely gray, thinner than I remembered. He looked older, smaller. Margaret still had the same pearls at her neck, but her shoulders slumped as if carrying the weight of years she couldn't pretend away. Ethan had grown broader. He wore a suit that didn't quite fit anymore. His gaze kept shifting, restless. Vanessa, immaculate as always, now had lines around her eyes and lips pressed into a too tight smile. The children looked confused, bored, as if they'd been promised something they hadn't yet received. I sat back, the tablet still in hand, pulse racing. What could they possibly want? They hadn't so much as liked a post, let alone reached out in over a decade. Every milestone I hit, every headline, every funding round was met with silence from the people who once said, "You should be grateful we took you in." And yet, here they were. Why now? I told myself, don't answer. Let them rot at the gate. Let them stand there until the silence they once gave you swallows them whole. But curiosity, insidious and sharp, crept in. What if they were here to apologize? I hated that thought. Hated how, even after everything, some part of me still yearned for something resembling remorse, recognition, closure. I placed the mug down, stood slowly, and walked inside. From the control panel in the foyer, I pressed the intercom. My voice was even, cold. "Can I help you?" There was a pause. Then Margaret's voice, cracked and unfamiliar, came through. "Claire, it's us. Your mother and father." I didn't answer. She continued. "We saw the article in the journal, the gala, your foundation. We wanted to talk, please." There it was. They hadn't come because they missed me. They came because they finally realized who I'd become. Because my name was in a magazine. Because I mattered. Now. My thumb hovered over the deny access button. I imagined their faces falling, them walking back to their car in silence. A part of me longed for that image. But I didn't press it. Instead, I said, "Wait." I walked upstairs, changed into jeans and a black blouse, tied my hair back. Not for them. For me. By the time I opened the front door, they stood arranged like they were posing for a photograph. Margaret stepped forward, arms open. "You look beautiful." I stepped back slightly, just enough to block the threshold. "What are you doing here?" "We just wanted to see you," Gregory said. 15 years, I replied. "And now you show up." Ethan cleared his throat. "We've been following your work. We're proud of you." Proud. The word made me want to laugh. "I almost didn't open the gate," I said. Vanessa's eyes darted around the entryway. Calculating. Always calculating. "These are my kids," she offered, gesturing to the boy and girl. "Jack and Emma." The children looked up at me, curious but cautious. I studied them for a moment. They had no idea who I was. I nodded once. "Hello?" Then I stepped aside. "Come in." Because whatever this was, I intended to see it through. On my terms. The living room felt colder than usual, though the air conditioning was off. My family, if I could still call them that, sat on my Italian leather couches as if they were trying not to sink too deep into the luxury. Their eyes kept moving, from the art on the walls to the view of the garden to the high ceilings above. I noticed how none of them made direct eye contact for more than a second. I poured coffee from the kitchen and returned with a tray. Old habits. Hospitality was muscle memory, even for those who didn't deserve it. They accepted the cups like props in a badly rehearsed play. Margaret was the first to speak. "Claire, this home is breathtaking." "It serves its purpose," I said, settling across from them. Ethan gave a weak laugh. "We always knew you were smart, just didn't know you'd go this far." "I had good motivation," I replied. "Absence, mostly." Margaret winced. There was a long pause, filled only by the soft clinking of spoons against porcelain. Then Gregory leaned forward. "We didn't just come to admire your success. We wanted to reconnect. As a family." The word hit like a slap. "Reconnect?" I echoed. "Why now?" Margaret looked nervous. "Well, we've been following your career, the foundation, the IPO. It's clear you've built something extraordinary." "And?" I asked, voice calm but sharp. Gregory cleared his throat. "We were hoping you might consider helping us. We're looking to start a new business venture, a consulting firm." "And you want what?" I asked, though I already knew. "An investment," Ethan said. "About 2 million would get things off the ground." Silence. 2 million. Like they were asking to borrow a cup of sugar. "You haven't spoken to me in 15 years, I said slowly. "And now you want funding?" "We wouldn't ask if we didn't believe in the project," Gregory said. "We want this to be a family business, something we can all be part of." Vanessa nodded. "And you wouldn't have to be involved day to day, just a silent partner." I stared at her. "That's convenient." "We'd pay you back," Margaret added quickly, "with interest." The coffee in my cup had gone cold, but I didn't move. "And this is why you're here?" I asked. "Not for forgiveness, not to apologize, but for money." Another silence. Then Vanessa shifted in her seat, her tone suddenly sharper. "There's something else," she said, avoiding her parents' gaze. Gregory looked at her sharply. "Vanessa." "No," she cut him off. "She deserves to know." I raised an eyebrow. Vanessa turned to me. "Do you remember the old lake house? The one Grandpa bought in Wisconsin?" "Barely," I said. "It was sold after he passed," she continued. What no one told you is that you were listed as a 50% beneficiary on the deed. It was never updated after Grandma died. Legally, you owned half of it. I stared at her, stunned. We sold it 5 years ago, she admitted. It was worth over $30 million. Waterfront development exploded. We kept your share. The room spun. Gregory slammed his cup down. That's enough! She was going to find out eventually, Vanessa snapped. Margaret looked pale. Claire, we were going to tell you. We just didn't know how. You didn't know how to tell me I owned half of a multi-million-dollar property, I said, voice rising. So you just didn't? You had your own success, Gregory argued. You didn't need it. I laughed, a dry, sharp sound. Oh, so you decided what I needed. No one responded. I stood slowly, smoothing the fabric of my pants, regaining my composure. Well, this has been enlightening. Claire, Margaret began. I held up a hand. Save it. Then I smiled, a calm, calculating smile, the kind I reserved for boardrooms and negotiations. Please, make yourselves comfortable, I said, gesturing toward the living room. Let me get something to show you. I walked down the hall, past the kitchen, into my study. It was time for a new kind of meeting, one where I held all the power. When I returned to the living room, I was no longer the host, I was the judge. In my hands were 2 items, a leather-bound album and a sleek silver laptop. I placed both gently on the coffee table in front of them. Margaret eyed the album with confusion. Ethan frowned. Gregory crossed his arms. Vanessa looked like she already knew she'd regret staying. I said smoothly. Before we discuss this family business proposal, we should take a walk down memory lane. I opened the album. The first page held a photo, one I'd printed from social media. Thanksgiving, year 1, I narrated, just 3 months after you told me not to contact you again. The photo showed a warm family gathering. Turkey, candles, laughter, Gregory carving, Margaret toasting, Ethan and Vanessa smiling wide. I wasn't in it. I turned the page. Christmas, same year, Vanessa's engagement dinner. Caption, so grateful to have the whole family together. I turned again. Ethan's baby shower, Vanessa's graduation, Margaret's 60th birthday cruise. All of you, every single one. Each page documented a celebration, carefully curated online, each post carrying phrases like, complete family, and everyone I love in one place. My absence was never explained. It was like I'd never existed. This is absurd, Gregory muttered. Absurd, I echoed. It gets better. I opened the laptop and turned it toward them. This, I said, is the email you sent me, Gregory, after I mailed you just one holiday card the year after I left. I clicked. Claire, please refrain from contacting the family again. We are not interested in maintaining communication. Respect our privacy and move on with your life. Gregory Thompson. Gregory's face reddened. And this, I continued, is a message Vanessa sent to a mutual friend. She accidentally copied me. I clicked again. Ugh. My sister, the tech genius, made another Forbes list. Mom won't shut up about it. She acts like being rich erases being a total freak growing up. Some people just get lucky, I guess. Vanessa inhaled sharply. That wasn't meant for you. I noticed, I said coolly. But it clarified things. They sat in silence now, stunned, unsure of their next move. Then I leaned forward, voice softening with the kind of calm that comes right before a storm. So, you see, I said, while you were busy erasing me from family photos and pretending I didn't exist, I was busy too. I opened a locked folder on the laptop. Curious what happens when you build a cybersecurity company? I asked. You learn how to investigate things properly. I clicked again. A document opened. Gregory, this is the incorporation paperwork for a company called TGR Solutions, registered in Nevada 2 years ago, under your name. Gregory's jaw tightened. Except, I continued, it has no website, no employees, no products, just a shell. I pulled up bank records. And these are flagged transactions showing that TGR Solutions received multiple wire transfers from offshore accounts, then funneled the funds to several domestic LLCs tied to, surprise, Ethan! Ethan's head snapped toward his father. What the hell is she talking about? She's bluffing, Gregory said quickly. She has no proof. Actually, I replied, I do. Thanks to a little help from a forensic accountant on my board. We flagged it as part of a due diligence drill. I wasn't even looking for you. But the moment your name popped up, I knew exactly what I was seeing. Margaret looked horrified. That company, it was supposed to be dormant, she whispered. Until you needed a way to move money without the IRS noticing, I asked. Or until you thought you could use it as leverage for your next family business. Vanessa stood suddenly. You've been spying on us? No, I've been protecting myself, I said, because I knew this day would come. I knew eventually you'd crawl back, not because you missed me, but because you wanted something. I stood and slowly closed the album. And now you want $2 million, after stealing from me, after deleting me from your lives, after slandering me to the media. Gregory stood too. You don't know what you're accusing us of. I know exactly what I'm doing, I said, and this time, no one had a word to refute it. I let the silence linger, letting them sit in the tension they had created. No one moved. No one spoke. The room, moments ago filled with veiled manipulation, was now heavy with unveiled truth. Finally, I exhaled. Let's be clear, I said. There will be no investment, no partnership, no second chances. Margaret opened her mouth to protest, but I raised a hand. However, I added, shifting my attention to the two children sitting quietly on the sofa. This isn't their fault. Jack and Emma looked up at me, confused but attentive. I'll establish 2 educational trusts, I continued, fully funded until their college graduation, should they choose to go. No strings attached, no access by anyone but them when they're of age. That's all I'm offering. Vanessa stiffened but nodded, pride clearly at war with pragmatism. Gregory stood, his expression darkening. And what if we say no? You think you can buy us off? What if I take this little accusation of yours and turn it around, file a defamation suit, leak it to the press that you're unstable, vindictive? I smiled. Not a sarcastic grin, but a knowing one. Gregory, I said gently, do you hear yourself? He stepped forward. You think all this money, this house, makes you untouchable? No, I said, but preparation does. And with that, I reached into the side table drawer and pulled out a small device. With a click, the room filled with sound. Our conversation from the very beginning played back in crystal clarity. Every word, every ask, every threat. Gregory's voice echoed. 2 million would get things off the ground. Ooh, Vanessa. You were listed as a 50% beneficiary. Margaret. We didn't know how to tell you. Gregory's threat was clear, unfiltered. File a defamation suit. Leak it to the press. When the recording ended, I turned it off and placed it neatly on the table. I record every meeting in this house, I said simply. For legal reasons, of course. And as I'm sure you noticed, you agreed to the standard guest consent when you passed through the main gate. Ethan muttered something under his breath. Vanessa sat frozen. You came into my home thinking you could manipulate me, I said, my voice low and steady. That you could spin the narrative one more time. But I don't need revenge. I don't need to destroy you. I looked at Gregory, then Margaret. You did that yourselves. No one answered. Gregory clenched his jaw. Margaret's eyes were glassy. Vanessa looked away, her hand protectively resting on her daughter's shoulder. Ethan stood but didn't meet my gaze. Take your coffee, I said. Or don't. But take yourselves out of my house. They gathered their things slowly, the air thick with the realization that whatever they had come to reclaim was never theirs to begin with. As they walked toward the front door, I followed at a distance. Vanessa paused at the threshold. I meant it, you know. What I said years ago in that email, I was wrong. You earned everything, and maybe we didn't deserve to be part of it. I nodded once. You're right. Jack looked back, his small face uncertain. Are you really our aunt? I bent slightly. Yes, and you can still write to me someday, if you want. He nodded, solemn and silent, before Vanessa gently guided him forward. I closed the door behind them, not with a slam, but with finality. I leaned against the polished wood, exhaling, not in relief, but release. There was no vindication in that exchange, only clarity. I didn't need to ruin them, they had already undone themselves. And I had everything I needed. The silence after they left was deafening, not because it hurt, but because it finally didn't. I stood for a while at the door, the weight of their exit still settling over me like dust that had been waiting 15 years to fall. Then I walked to the garden, my sanctuary, my refuge, the only place in the world where every bloom had meaning. I sat down on the bench beneath the arbor where the plaque honoring Grandma Grace gleamed under the morning sun. My fingers brushed the cool metal. To Grace, the one who saw me. Without thinking, I reached for my phone and called the only person who had stood beside me since this journey began. Lillian answered on the second ring. "You okay?" she asked. No pleasantries, no small talk. "They came," I said. She didn't ask who, she already knew. "And they left," I added. "Empty." There was a long pause. "Do you need company?" "Yes." 20 minutes later, she arrived with a thermos of lemon tea and a box of almond pastries. She found me still on the bench, staring out at the lavender rose Grandma Grace used to love. We sat in silence for a few minutes, just sipping tea, the air filled with birdsong and late summer warmth. "I always imagined that moment differently," I said eventually. "Them crawling back, me with power. I thought it would feel like victory." "And it doesn't?" Lillian asked gently. "It feels like closing a book I should have finished years ago." Lillian nodded, setting her cup down. "Then maybe now's the time to start a new one." I looked at her. "I already have." She raised an eyebrow. "I'm starting a foundation," I said. "Named after Grace, for kids like me, kids who got pushed out, forgotten, rejected." Her expression shifted, soft, proud. "Tell me everything." I did. I told her about the Grace Foundation, about the vision, scholarships, therapy programs, mentorships. Legal aid for teens aging out of the system, a place for healing, for rebuilding, for choosing your own family. "I don't want to just throw money at the problem," I said. "I want to create something with teeth, something that wraps around these kids like armor." Lillian reached over and squeezed my hand. "That's exactly what Grace would have done." "I'm going to start with 20 students," I continued. "Full tuition, living stipends, emotional support." "Need a board member?" she asked with a smile. "You were already my first choice." We sat back, listening to the breeze rustling the roses, and for the first time in weeks, I felt stillness, not as absence, but as peace. A few weeks later, the first batch of letters arrived, thick envelopes on creamy paper, scrawled in a dozen different handwritings, each one from a student who had been awarded a Grace grant. I read them in my study, one by one, as the late afternoon light painted gold across the bookshelves. "I never thought I'd get into college, let alone have someone believe I belong there. Thank you for giving me a second chance before life even gave me a first. Your story gave me the courage to apply. Now I get to start writing mine." By the fourth letter, the words blurred. By the fifth, I was crying, not from sadness, but because I finally understood what it felt like to give love freely and to receive it back, untainted. There, in that room, surrounded by stories just beginning, I realized something Grandma Grace had always tried to teach me. Family isn't where you come from. It's who you fight for, and who fights for you. 2 months after launching the foundation, I decided it was time. Not for another gala, not for press, but for something personal. I sent out handwritten invitations, each one inked in my own looping script, sealed with wax the color of Grandma Grace's ruby ring. I invited only those who had stood by me, not out of obligation, not out of blood, but by choice. Lillian, of course. Caleb Morgan, my first investor. Maya, Layla, Ty, my original team from the Sleepless Startup Nights. Diana, my old roommate from San Francisco. Even the librarian from Stanford who once snuck me extra print credits when I couldn't afford them. And then I invited the 20 students who had received the first Grace grants, including one small quiet girl named Rosa, whose letter had left me in tears for 3 days. The garden was lit with paper lanterns and scattered with wildflowers. Tables were laid with handmade place cards, and food was catered from a local chef who used to be a foster kid himself. Music played softly from the old record player in the corner of my library wing, drifting out through the open patio doors. It wasn't extravagant, it was intentional. Every hug that night felt earned, every conversation real. No one asked about stock prices or IPOs. They asked about books, about dreams, about the future. Near the middle of the evening, I stepped up onto a small platform under the arbor and raised a glass. "I never thought I'd build a life like this," I said. "And certainly not with people like you, who chose to stand beside me. You've taught me that family isn't built by matching DNA, but by shared truth, loyalty, and love." The crowd raised their glasses back. No applause, just knowing nods, tears in some eyes. Later, while wandering through the garden paths, I felt a small tug on my sleeve. It was Rosa. She was 10. Dark curls, oversized glasses, and a seriousness in her eyes that no child should carry. She looked up at me, shy but certain. "Do you like being alone?" she asked. I knelt to her level. "Sometimes, but not always." She hesitated, then blurted, "Can I stay with you? Like, always?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" "My foster mom says I might have to move again, but I don't want to. I want to live here, with you. I want you to be my mom." The world stopped spinning. I felt my breath catch in my throat, not out of fear, but awe. No press release, no contract, no victory speech had ever landed with this kind of weight. I cupped her face gently. "Rosa, you want to stay here?" She nodded fiercely. "You want me to be your family?" She nodded again. "You already are." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I pulled her into a hug, and for the first time in my life, I felt something I never thought I'd be trusted with: belonging from the other side. Weeks later, with legal help and care, I began the process of adopting Rosa. It was not a rescue. It was a beginning. One warm evening, after the guests had left and the lanterns had dimmed, I returned to the garden bench beneath the arbor. Rosa was asleep inside, curled up with a book I once loved. I looked out across the flowers, the soft light painting the petals gold and rose. On my finger, the ruby ring caught the last of the sun's rays. It no longer felt like a weight of grief. It felt like a promise kept, a reminder of the woman who believed in me when no one else did, and a signal that it was my turn now, to see, to believe, to give. I placed my hand on the plaque again and whispered, "You were right, Grace. Love found me. Not because I chased it, but because I created space for it to land." And then, with tears in my eyes, not of sorrow, but of fulfillment, I said aloud the truth I had come to know in every corner of my soul. Family is not who you're born into. It's who stands by you when the world doesn't.